All right, go right ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Jackson.
Trooper Proctor, I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind to turn to tab 2 in the binder in front of you. Can you take a look at the face page of what's under tab 2 and tell me if you recognize that?
Yes, sir. It's a private text thread with high school friends.
And this includes 9 chat participants that you engaged with?
That's correct.
Those participants include people by the name of Bird, Whitey, and Doc, correct?
Correct.
And then there's some other folks in there. They're identified by at least the last 4 digits of their phone number, correct?
Yes.
So this is a group text or a group chat with you and 8 of your high school friends about this investigation, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you never thought when you were engaged with these other 8 individuals that this particular set of chats would ever become public, did you?
No, I did not.
I want to take a look at page 2527. If you could turn, that's on the bottom right of the document in tab 2. Do you have that page in front of you?
Yes, sir.
You recognize that this group chat was taking place on January 29th at about 10:52 p.m., correct?
Correct.
And the person that I'll identify as 5051, that's the last 4 digits of that phone number, indicates Chip, name of that BPD cop, correct?
Correct.
First of all, you indicated on Monday that you're Chip, is that right?
Yes, sir.
You responded at 10:53 p.m., John O'Keefe, is that right?
Yes, sir.
So you were willing to tell, just a few hours into an investigation of the death of a Boston police officer, you were willing to tell a bunch of high school buddies details about the investigation, including the name of the victim, correct?
At this point, it was 16 hours later, sir. Not a few.
16 is a few hours, correct? I'm not talking about days later.
It was about 16 hours later, sir.
Correct. And you identified John O'Keefe as the Boston police officer who is fallen in the yard at 34 Fairview, correct?
Correct.
You also informed, if you will skip to page 2529, you also informed these same folks, these same high school buddies that, quote, all the powers that be want answers ASAP, correct?
Yes.
You knew, Trooper Proctor, that there was brass that wanted this case wrapped up quickly and efficiently. Isn't that right?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Is that what you were thinking?
No, the people wanted answers, sir.
They didn't just want answers, they wanted answers ASAP. What does ASAP mean?
That's as soon as possible.
Right. And you were texting this to your high school friends, again, 16 hours into this investigation, right?
Correct.
And you knew at that time, Trooper Proctor, that this was not going to implicate in any way, shape, form, or fashion another cop, correct?
Correct.
In this text exchange, let's turn to 2532, actually. You have that in front of you?
I do.
In this text exchange at 10:56 p.m., your buddy Bird writes, I'm sure the owners of the house will receive some shit, correct?
Correct.
How did you take that to mean? Did you take that to mean that he could get in trouble?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what my friend was getting at.
Well, you had some idea.
Yeah, maybe.
The owners of the house isn't going to get any shit for this, right?
That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, you interpreted it like he's not going to get in any trouble. He's not going to be a suspect, correct?
Correct.
And he's not going to be implicated in any way. Is that right?
Correct.
And your answer was one word, correct?
Yes.
What was that word?
Nope.
And then you followed that up with an explanation as to why you said no, didn't you?
That wasn't the explanation why I said nope. I simply said homeowner is a Boston cop too, meaning Mr. O'Keefe was a Boston cop. The homeowner was a Boston cop as well.
The question that preceded your answer, nope, the homeowner's a Boston cop too, was the homeowner's gonna get some shit for this, correct?
That's not what I meant with that text.
That's what you wrote.
Not what I meant, sir.
All right, let's take it in order. Question. Oh goodness, the homeowner's gonna get some shit for this. Answer, nope. Next text, he's a Boston cop too. That doesn't sound like an explanation for your nope.
No, that's just saying he's a Boston cop as well. Mr. O'Keefe is a
And that's
Boston
why
cop.
he's not going to get any shit. Correct, Trooper Proctor?
Well, he's not going to receive any shit, sir, because Mr. Albert, the homeowner, had nothing to do with Mr. O'Keefe's death.
And you knew this 16 hours into your investigation.
Yes.
Less than a day.
Yes.
To your satisfaction.
To my satisfaction
And
and
you
to the
hadn't
members
been
of my
to the
unit.
crime scene?
So let him finish. We didn't get the, finish
Some-
your answer?
To my satisfaction and to all the members of my unit who investigated that day.
Objection. Calls for speculation.
So I'm going to let it stand. Trooper Proctor, you have to keep your voice up, okay? Jurors need to hear you way back there.
Yes, ma'am.
The fact of the matter is, you hadn't been to the crime scene by the time you wrote this text, correct?
Correct.
You hadn't been inside the home, correct?
No.
You had you had questioned a grand total of 3 percipient witnesses at this point, correct?
Yes.
And 2 of the 3 were named McCabe, right?
Correct.
And 1 of the 3 was named Albert, correct?
Yes.
And it's against that backdrop that you wrote, nope, the homeowner's not going to get any shit because he's a cop, right?
That's not what I meant by that.
At 10:57, Bird goes on to write, he, the homeowner, must have been a puddle to accomplish that. And then he writes, who's the homeowner? And then he writes, I hope not, but I can see it. Correct?
Yes.
A puddle means drunk, correct?
That's a term for it, yes.
In other words, Bird wrote that the homeowner must have been so drunk, so wasted to have killed him. Correct?
Objection.
Do you know what that means? Do you know what that text means?
Just the puddle part, Your Honor. That term.
All right, so he can answer that.
And the puddle part means drunk or wasted, right?
Yes.
And what Bird actually wrote was, he must have been a puddle to accomplish that. Correct?
That's what he wrote.
And then you write back, quote, she waffled him. I looked at his body at the hospital, right?
Correct.
You used the phrase waffled about a Boston police officer who had fallen in the snow and died in someone's yard. And you decided to use the word waffled him, correct?
Objection.
So sustained. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Did you answer, she waffled him, I looked at his body at the hospital?
I did answer that, yes.
And then Bird questioned, she waffled him, correct?
Yes.
And then you responded, he was banged up. Is that right?
Yes.
Then a person with the phone number 0095 wrote, I thought he was drunk. Did he get beat up? You see that?
I do.
And you wrote, nope. Is that right?
Correct.
Yet again, this is before 11 o'clock at night on January 29th, 2022, some 16 hours into your investigation. Is that right?
Yes.
So before you ever went to the crime scene, before you ever went into the house, only having interviewed 3 folks, you had this case nice and wrapped up, didn't you?
Yes. Based on the evidence my office uncovered that day, the one shoot discovered at the scene, the one shoot at the hospital, Mr. O'Keefe's injuries, the broken taillight pieces underneath the snow.
Trooper Proctor, I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked, did you, in your mind, have this case wrapped up? Was it cut and dry in your mind?
Yes.
Bird then writes, so the owner of the house was a woman cop that beat him, question mark, right?
Yes.
And then you wrote, that's what I initially thought after talking to Canton paramedics. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you said, then I saw the guy, correct?
Correct.
So what you meant by that, Trooper Proctor, was according to you, based on your conversations, your initial conversations with the paramedics, the first responders, you were under the impression that this was a beating death. He'd been beaten to death, correct?
The way it was given to me, sir, was
That's yes
for
or no?
medical.
That's yes
No,
or no?
he's going to answer the question. If you want
Go
to
ahead.
withdraw the question, you can.
No, go ahead.
We entered this investigation with an open mind. It was given to me as a medical situation. And when we saw Mr. O'Keefe's body at the hospital with Sergeant Buchanan and I, we saw his injuries and we were kind of working through how these injuries occurred.
As a matter of fact, both you and Sergeant Buchanan believed that he had suffered the injuries as a result of a physical altercation based on information you received from the paramedics initially, correct?
Initially, we didn't know what we had. We knew there was some significant injuries to Mr. O'Keefe. And we were still figuring out how those injuries occurred.
Well, you just testified. Initially, we didn't know what we had.
Right.
But 16 hours after the fact, you wrote the following sentence. That's what I initially thought after talking to Canton paramedics, correct?
Correct.
So initially, you did think you knew what you had, a physical altercation leading to a death, correct?
Correct.
So when you just said, initially we didn't know what we had, that wasn't quite true. You did at least have an idea of what you thought you had, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
All right. You were aware, initially, that John O'Keefe had suffered a 2-inch laceration to the back of his head, correct?
Yes.
That resulted in a skull fracture, correct?
Correct.
He had a laceration over his right eye, small laceration just under the eyebrow, correct?
Yes.
Had a laceration on his nose, is that right?
Correct.
He had patterned scratches on his right arm, abrasions, scratches, correct?
Yes.
And he had no injuries below the neck.
Not that I observed, sir.
Not a single broken bone, correct?
Not that I was aware of.
Not a single fracture, correct?
Not that I was aware of.
Not a single bruise below the neck, right?
Not that I observed.
Looks a lot like a physical altercation, doesn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
Bird writes, Bear, let's focus, correct?
Yes.
Who's Bear?
That's another nickname I have.
0095 writes, what does she waffled him mean? And then Bird writes, what's the story, correct?
Correct.
And you wrote, she hit him with her car. Is that right?
Yes.
Have you ever seen, in your experience, have you ever seen a pedestrian who's hit by a 6,000-pound car with no bruises? Ever?
The pedestrian strikes I've seen have been at high speeds,
Enough to
60
knock
plus.
a person out of his shoe, right?
60 plus miles per hour. So I can't recall right now off the top of my head as far as injuries in the past pedestrian strikes I've attended.
Okay. So someone, you indicated on Monday, under examination by Mr. Lally, you've seen a shoe missing,
Correct.
pedestrian strikes, correct?
Yes.
Those are high-speed, extremely high-speed incidents, correct?
Yes.
60 plus miles an hour, right?
I can't recall all the pedestrian strikes I've been to as far as the miles per hour the vehicle is traveling.
Trooper Proctor, let me ask you the question again. Have you ever, yes or no, have you ever, in your experience, seen a vehicle pedestrian incident in which the pedestrian has no bruises?
Objection.
Have you seen that?
I can't recall.
Okay, next question.
After you wrote, she hit him with her car, 5051 writes, oh Jesus, and Bird writes, okay, that's fucked up, correct?
Correct.
And then you wrote what?
Intentional or not?
Intentional or not? Is that right?
Yes.
Your words.
Correct.
0095 then chimes in, gotcha. He was frozen in the driveway and she didn't see him? Question mark. Correct?
Correct.
And you wrote what?
That's another animal we won't be able to prove.
That's another animal we won't be able to prove, correct?
Correct.
Trooper Proctor, you knew that there were going to be things in this case, even 16 hours into this, that you just admitted you would have zero proof of, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently.
Did you mean by that statement that this was one of several things that you knew we would not be able to prove?
That statement, that's another animal we won't be able to prove, references the intentional or not part.
You didn't care at that point when you wrote that, you didn't care what you could or could not prove, did you?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Isn't that what you meant?
No.
You had a narrative that you had developed, and you would pursue it no matter what the proof was. That's what you meant by that statement, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently, Mr. Judge.
Did you mean by that, thank you, Your Honor, I didn't mean to step on your words. Did you mean by that statement that you were going to pursue this case no matter what the proof might be?
What I meant by that statement was if Miss Reed backed into Mr. O'Keefe intentionally or not.
Interestingly, though, that statement came on the heels of he was frozen in the driveway and she didn't see him. And you wrote in response to that question, that's another animal we won't be able to prove. Correct?
That's not what I was responding to. I was responding to the intentional or not part.
So you were responding to your own statement, according
Correct.
Okay. 0095 then writes, what's the name of the Canton cop living in Canton? The other one involved. Correct?
Yes.
In other words, that person was asking, tell me the name of the homeowner. Isn't that right?
Yes.
The guy that's the cop, right?
Correct.
And you ignored that question for a second time. Is that right?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, not one time, not once in this entire group chat did you disclose the name Brian Albert, did you?
I don't believe so, no.
You were actively trying to hide Brian Albert's name, at least from this conversation.
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that what you were trying to do?
Absolutely not.
But you had no problem sharing John O'Keefe's name with your buddies from high school, right?
Correct.
And you had no problem sharing Karen Reed's name with your buddies from high school, correct?
I don't believe I named the defendant.
Not yet, you didn't. Later in the chat.
Okay, correct.
5051 then writes, the BPD have any jurisdiction here because it was their own? Question mark. Is that right?
Yes.
And a few texts later, if you look down a few texts, at about 11 o'clock, you see a text that starts, nah, cat.
I do, sir, yes.
You responded, quote, nah, N-A-H, nah, cat, K-A-T-T. It's the total opposite. They have to recuse themselves. Same with Canton. Correct?
That text ends as they have to recuse themselves.
You then text back, I'm sorry, can I have a moment?
Yes.
Flip the next page.
I see where you're at, sir.
How did you end that text?
Same with Canton.
Meaning Canton has to recuse itself also, correct?
That was my understanding.
So by 11 p.m. on January 29th, 2022, there was no question in your mind, Trooper Proctor, that the Canton Police Department was recused from this investigation in all particulars, correct?
That they had taken a step back from participating, yes.
Right. Well, there's one way to put it. They've taken a step back from participating. Another way to put it is they recused themselves completely, correct?
Correct.
They were not going to be, at least in your mind, they were not to be involved in any way, just like Boston PD was not to be involved in any way. Is that right?
Objection.
Is that what you were thinking?
It was my understanding they were not going to be involved.
Now, if we could turn to page 2537. 5051 writes, but I assume you guys are out to make it cut and dry since it involves cops, correct?
Yes.
And Bird writes, something stinks, correct?
Correct.
And then Trooper Proctor, you responded, yeah, but there will be some serious charges brought on the girl. Isn't that right?
That's right.
So in that text exchange, you were saying, yeah, we're out to make it cut and dry, correct?
No.
You didn't write, yeah, we're going to follow the evidence wherever it takes us. You didn't, did you?
I did not write that.
You didn't write, yeah, we're going to make sure that we investigate this thing fully and thoroughly before making any decisions. You didn't say that, did you?
I did not.
You wrote, yeah, but there will be some serious charges brought on the girl. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And the reason you wrote that is because you knew, as the text above it says, this has to be cut and dry because it involves cops, right?
Objection.
I'm going to allow that. Is that the reason you wrote it?
No, Your Honor.
And then you indicated, we're going to put serious charges on the girl. Who did you mean by the girl, by the way?
The defendant.
Karen Reed?
Yes, sir.
So the way that you were going to make it cut and dry, pretty simple. Just pin it on the girl, right?
Objection.
Is that right?
Absolutely not. Follow the facts and the evidence from that day on the 29th, and everything led to Miss Reed hitting Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle.
But that wasn't the question that you were answering, was it? We're going to follow the evidence and make sure we do this thoroughly. The question you were answering was, I assume you guys, you, Trooper Proctor, and your team are going to, quote, make it cut and dry since it involves cops, meaning Brian Albert, correct?
Incorrect. Doesn't matter to me if the homeowner's a cop, if the victim's a police officer. Myself and everyone in my office investigated this case that Saturday, had an overwhelming amount of evidence that Miss Reed struck Mr. O'Keefe. So it didn't matter to us what their occupation was.
We'll see. Let's keep reading, shall we? 5051, a little further down, says, gotta be, I could only imagine what internal affairs at BPD are trying to get out there. Correct?
Correct.
Meaning, this person, 5051, was opining, at least in your mind, you interpreted that as being Boston police are going to have a lot to answer for given the fact that another Boston police officer was found dead on that officer's lawn. Correct?
Objection.
What were you thinking?
Can't speak to the mindset to that comment. I wasn't sure how to interpret that one.
All right, next question, Mr. Jackson.
Then 5051 changes gears. And he writes, she hot at least? Correct?
Yes.
And what was your response to that?
From all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. She's a whack job cunt.
From all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. She's a whack job cunt. That's what you wrote, correct?
Correct.
16 hours into this investigation,
Yes.
into your objective and unbiased, thorough investigation, correct?
Correct.
But sir, you didn't have all accounts, did you?
What I meant by that was
Did you or did you not have all accounts in your investigation?
the accounts we had was Miss Reed struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle, discovered taillight pieces at the scene. Those are the accounts we had.
The accounts
And then
you
some.
had, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The accounts you had, Trooper Proctor, were from two people named McCabe and one named Albert, who happened to be the homeowner and a Boston cop. Those are the accounts from percipient witnesses that you had, correct?
There was another additional witness that we had investigators had interviewed, Miss Roberts as well.
And from all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. That was your decision 16 hours into the investigation, correct?
Yes.
And the other decision that you made and the other determination you came to was my client, Karen Reed, was a whack job cunt, right?
Yes.
What else did you say in response to, she's hot at least? Or she hot at least, question mark.
So following that text, I responded, yeah, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass.
Yeah, she's a babe. Who's the she?
Misread.
Weird Fall River accent, though. You talking about her, the way she talks?
The accent.
And no ass. Now you're talking about her body, her physique, correct?
Yes.
You think that's appropriate?
Absolutely not.
Then Bird chimes in with a little comedy. Not newsworthy then, correct?
Correct.
In other words, well, if she didn't have an ass, nothing to see here, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
And then 5051 says, oh, she's skating, right?
Correct.
And what did you write after that?
My response was zero chance she skated.
And then what did you write?
She's fucked.
Zero chance she skates. She's fucked, right?
Correct.
You decided on the 29th of January, 17 hours into this investigation, you decided individually, Trooper Proctor, you're not only going to put it on the girl, you decided you're going to make sure this is cut and dried, and the way you're going to do it is to make sure that she's fucked. That's what you were saying.
Objection.
All right, so that's sustained. You can, the content's fine. You have to ask it differently.
17 hours into this investigation, Trooper Proctor, you made the decision that you were going to put it on Miss Reed, didn't you? Put the case on Miss Reed. She was going to catch the case, correct?
No, absolutely not.
What did you mean then when you said she's fucked?
After the day's investigation with multiple troopers conducting multiple tasks and a debriefing at Canton PD amongst detectives in my office, we went through the overwhelming amount of evidence against Miss Reed that she struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle. That's what I meant by that comment.
What you meant by that comment, Trooper Proctor, was you were going to make sure because 5051 had said she's going to skate. She's skating. When you said zero chance she skates, she's fucked. What you meant was I am going to make sure Ms. Reed doesn't skate. She's fucked. That's what you meant, isn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
And then Bird decides to chime in. Good, no ass bitch, right?
Yes, that's what he wrote.
And how did you respond to Bird saying, good, no ass bitch?
I laughed.
Thought that was funny, did you? Trooper Proctor? Thought that was funny?
It was unprofessional of me. That's something I shouldn't have done.
Well, I think we all know it was unprofessional. It was a lot of things. I'm asking
Yep.
you, did you think it was funny?
According to my response at the time, apparently.
Then you sent a picture, just to add to it, to pile on, of Miss Reed being arrested, correct?
I don't... I'm not sure if that came from me, sir.
Let's skip to 2543. Are you there, Trooper Proctor?
Yes.
The date is now February 2nd, 2022. And a person by the name of Doc writes, is that chick a smoke? Correct?
Correct.
Who's the chick?
Miss Reed.
And you write, E-H, right?
Yes.
And then you write nutbag, as Chief would say, correct?
Correct.
Who's chief?
A friend of mine.
And then you write what?
She's got a leaky balloon knot.
Trooper Proctor, explain to the jurors what a balloon knot is.
Your essentially, I guess, your rectum area.
Your anus?
Yes.
That's what you were referring to about Miss Reed?
Yes.
And you were making fun of her because you believed at that time that it leaked? That's how you were treating Miss Reed? Yes or no?
Yes.
And then you followed that up just to make sure you cleared up any mistake about what you meant with leaks poo, correct?
Objection.
All right, so I'm going to strike that. You could get this in, but do it the right way, Mr. Jackson.
You followed that up with the phrase leaks poo, didn't you?
I did.
Again, another reference to Miss Reed's medical issues and medical conditions, correct?
Correct.
Specifically focused on her anus, correct?
In reference, yes.
Were you aware at the time that you wrote this that Miss Reed had suffered a colectomy surgery, very serious surgery?
I was not, sir, no.
Were you aware that she had had 10 surgeries in 18 months, several years prior? 10.
I was not aware of that.
Were you aware that she had serious medical issues, gastrointestinal medical issues that she suffered with, she was a victim of for years? Did you know that?
Objection.
Sustained.
But you decided that you were going to take another shot at her and talk about her anatomy.
1 second, sir. I'm sorry. All set.
I'm sorry. Christine. You decided that you were going to take another shot at her and talk about her anatomy as a balloon knot, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
At this point, Trooper Proctor, Miss Reed was just reduced to a punchline to you, wasn't she?
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, you weren't done yet. This chat doesn't end yet, does it?
No, sir.
Let's skip to 2543. On the same date, February 2nd, 2022, about 4:15 p.m., a person by the name of Whitey wrote, "What are you guzzling on?" Correct?
Yes.
And you wrote, "Nothing," writing a warrant. Is that right?
Correct.
Whitey then shares some sort of a video, correct?
Yes.
You remember that video being of the 1980s band Warrant?
I don't recall the video he sent.
0095 laughed and then wrote, "Wait, why does her asshole leak?" Correct?
Yes, that's what he wrote.
And then what did Doc write in response to that?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection sustained. I'll see you at sidebar. Take that down, please.
You are unmuted.
Without
that-
reference to-
Take that down.
Go ahead, pull it up. Without reference to the specifics of what was.
I'm going to see Counselor Tybar.
Sure.
You are unmuted.
Trooper Proctor, without getting to the specifics of the words used in the following, in the next exchange that you're looking at, it's fair to say that your high school buddies then continue to discuss Ms. Reed's medical issues, correct?
Objection.
That's sustained. Come on, Mr. Jackson. That isn't what you said you'd ask. Go ahead and ask the question you said you'd ask.
Was there a continued discussion that finished on this subject matter?
Yes.
On Monday, you indicated that your conduct in this case, and specifically your conduct as reflected in these messages, how did you put it? It did not affect the integrity of the investigation, of your investigation, correct? That's what you
Correct.
said to the jurors.
Correct.
Do you know what the definition of integrity is?
Doing the right thing when no one's looking.
It means the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you believe that integrity means being honest and having strong moral principles?
I believe that's part of it as well.
Do you stand by that testimony that you were showing strong moral principles in this investigation, sir?
In the investigation part, absolutely. Through these text messages, absolutely not. They were juvenile and regrettable.
When you say they're juvenile and regrettable, it sounds like you're almost apologizing to the jury for your conduct. Is that what you're doing?
For those text,
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Trooper Proctor, have you ever apologized to Miss Reed?
Objection.
Sustained.
As the lead investigator in this case, you were tasked with the responsibility of making sure that the investigation remained free of any conflicts of interest. That's part of your job, correct?
correct.
Throughout the pendency of this investigation, in this case, you've denied having any conflict of interest in this case. Isn't that right?
Correct.
In fact, a couple of months ago in February of 2024, you testified in a different proceeding. Is that right?
Yes.
And you testified under oath in that proceeding on February 1st that you did not know any members of the Albert family or McCabe family, correct?
Certain members of the Albert family I did not know. I know Chris and Julie and Colin. I don't know the McCabes.
That wasn't my question. Did you testify? Let's take them one at a time. Did you testify under oath, same oath you took here today, in a former proceeding in February of 2024 that you did not know and did not have any relationship with members of the Albert and McCabe families? Did you?
I haven't had a chance to review those minutes. I've only had one opportunity to, and that was a couple months ago. So I would want to review those minutes in order to answer that accurately.
You can't remember how you testified, whether or not you knew or had relationships with the Alberts and McCabe's?
Objection.
Sustained.
As you sit here right now, you need to refresh your recollection. You can't remember what you said?
Objection.
Do you remember what you said?
During that proceeding, no.
Would it refresh your recollection if you took a look at those grand jury minutes?
Yes.
What page, Mr. Jackson?
This is page 01563. If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
If you'd review that and look up when you're finished. Now, Your Honor.
Okay.
Would that refresh your recollection about a question and answer that you had, or a series of questions and answers that you had while you were testifying under oath in that other proceeding?
Yes, sir.
Objection. May we approach?
Yes.
You are unmuted.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. You were asked the question, quote, did you communicate with First Assistant DA Beeland that you did not know and had no relationship with the Albert and McCabe families? And you answered, quote, to the best of my recollection, the same conversation took place with everyone I talked to about this because it's the same answer. It's the facts that I shared with everyone. Question, meaning you told First Assistant Beeland that you didn't know, didn't have a relationships with
Objection, Your Honor.
members of the Albert and McCabe families. Answer, correct.
Yes, that's correct.
So your question is whether he said this?
Correct. Whether that's his testimony. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And that's your testimony that you, in fact, told members of the DA's office that you did not know and did not have a relationship with the Alberts or McCabe's. Is that right?
I did not know the McCabe's. I don't know most of the Alberts, and I have little to no relationship with Chris and Julie. So that's what I meant by that answer.
Well, the question wasn't, did you know most of the Alberts? The question was, did you have a relationship with, or did you know the Alberts? And your answer was, no.
No, I don't have a relationship with the Alberts.
Or know them.
I don't know the McCabe's. I don't have a relationship with the Alberts.
So you do
You
know
asked-
the Alberts, correct?
I know some of them, Julie and Chris.
And Colin, correct?
Correct, and Colin.
And you knew the Alberts when you gave this testimony in February of 2024. Is that right?
Yeah, they asked if there was any relationships.
And let's try this again. Meaning you told First Assistant Beeland that you didn't know, didn't have relationships with members of the Alberts and members of the Albert and McCabe families. Answer, correct. Was that ambiguous in your mind?
The way I interpreted relationships was basically being like friends or, communications, frequent communications. That's how I interpreted
Well, that might have been a
relations.
good time to pipe up and say, well, I know Chris and I know Julie and I know Colin, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
That might have been a good time to answer the question, I know these three individuals from the Albert family, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
But your answer was one word, correct, right?
Yes,
You further testified that you never have gone to any supervisor at Massachusetts State Police to disclose even a potential conflict of interest in this case that you might have, correct?
correct.
And you indicated the needs never come up. Is that right?
Correct.
You also told ADA Lally that you, quote, did not have relationships or know members of the Albert or McCabe families, correct?
Correct.
And that's just not true, is it? You did know, you do know members of the Albert family. Isn't that right?
It's different from having a relationship with people.
But what about part of the question, did not have relationships or know members of the Albert or McCabe families? How about that part of the question?
Well, that's lumped in with the McCabe's. I don't know the McCabe family, sir.
I see. So what you did, Trooper Proctor, is you dissected the sentence, and where relationships are concerned, you ignored that in terms of the Alberts because you don't have relationships. Where no is concerned, you link that to the McCabe's because you don't know the McCabe's. That's what you did?
No.
Objection.
So it's sustained. You can ask it. You can break it down, Mr. Jackson.
Not sure I can. I'll ask it a different way. How about if I just ask it this way? That was a lie, wasn't it?
No, absolutely not.
You stand by that testimony?
Yes,
That you don't know at the time that you testified, that you didn't know the Alberts or any members of the Albert family?
they don't have relationships with them.
Okay. My question is, you keep going back to relationships. I'm asking you, did you testify that you didn't know them?
Objection.
I'll let him have it. Do you understand the question, Trooper?
I knew Chris, Julie, and Colin.
So if you were to say, I don't know any members of the Albert family, that would have been a lie, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Your Honor, this is the point at which I intend to turn to tab 3, and I believe we need to approach.
Okay. Jurors, feel free to stand.
You are unmuted.
May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you've indicated that your sister is one of your best friends, maybe your best friend.
Yes.
Courtney Proctor, that's her name? Courtney
Correct.
Proctor. Elberg?
That, I'm sorry?
Her last name?
Elberg.
Elberg, with an L. And you're aware that she is also very, very good friends with Jillian Daniels, Julie Albert.
Correct.
Are you aware of any circumstance in which any of the Alberts have been over to your parents' house?
Yes.
Have you ever been over at your parents' house when any of the Alberts have been at your parents' house?
Yes.
Those Alberts include Chris Albert, Julie Albert, Colin Albert, correct?
Correct.
As a matter of fact, you were on or around January 29th, 2022, you were close enough friends with Julie Albert that she had your personal cell phone in her cell phone, correct? And vice versa.
I wouldn't classify us as close friends at all.
Okay, let me get back to my question. Did you have her cell phone in your phone and did she have yours?
I can't recall if I believe I had her stored in my phone.
Tab 4. All right. If you would turn to tab 4,
And what was this marked for ID?
this was,
Or tell me the numbers at the bottom.
I've got the sheet right here. I've got a cheat sheet. Tab 4 is triple B,
Okay.
as in Bravo. And Your Honor, for the court, I'm looking at page 2625.
Yep.
You have that in front of you, sir?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize the participants in this chat?
I do.
The number ending in 5374, you recognize that as being from Julie Albert?
Based off the content of the message, yeah, I recognize this text message from Julie.
And she texts, "This is the weekend I've been waiting for. Michael, please send ski videos if CP doesn't share with me," with a laughing face, correct?
Correct.
That text was sent on February 24th, 2022, wasn't it?
Yes.
That was less than a month after Mr. O'Keefe's death, isn't that right?
Correct.
And less than a month after you had been assigned to the investigation in which Julie Albert was a witness, correct?
Correct.
And her husband, Chris Albert, was a witness, correct?
Correct.
And her son, you knew, Colin, was involved as well, correct?
Yes.
Who is CP in that text message?
It's a nickname I have for my sister.
Courtney Proctor, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, if I may have just a moment.
Okay.
Zoom tight. move to Trooper Proctor to tab 5, please. That's triple C as in Charlie. Do you have that in front of you, sir?
Yes.
And this would be page 2664. If you return to that page, please.
Okay.
Trooper Proctor, on January 19th, 2022, 10 days before Mr. O'Keefe's death, you were texting with your sister about whether Julie Albert might be available to babysit for your own son, correct?
Yes.
So in fact, your relationship with the Alberts was close enough that you would consider leaving your own child in the hands of Julie Albert as a babysitter, as a caregiver for your toddler, correct?
I wouldn't say close enough. I've hired babysitters that I've had out, but I don't know.
But Julie Albert was among them, correct?
Yes, she was an option to watch my child.
And then you personally interviewed Julie Albert and Chris Albert in this case on February 10th, 2022.
Sergeant Buchanan and I did, yes.
And you didn't mention a thing about your relationship with Julie Albert, Chris Albert, or Colin Albert in any report that you ever drafted in this case, did you?
I did not.
Not one word, correct?
No, sir.
You interviewed Julie and Chris Albert at about 5:30 p.m. on the 10th of February, isn't that right?
Yes.
Did either of them, Julie or Chris Albert, mention that their son Colin Albert had been at 34 Fairview Road on the night in question, January 29th?
I'd have to reread the report to refresh my memory on their statements.
Well, let me ask it a different way, if I may have just a moment.
Yes.
You wrote a report on October 12th, 2022, correct?
For which,
Concerning your interview with,
Why don't you show it to him?
I may have the wrong report. Do you recall, Trooper Proctor, ever mentioning that whether or not Julie and Chris mentioned to you that their son had been at 34 Fairview on January 29th? Do you recall that as you sit here?
to the best of my recollection, no.
It was a very short interview with Julie and Chris, was it not?
It was typical length for the information they had to offer.
So you started the interview about 5:30 p.m. It must have been relatively short because you received a phone call by 6:17 from Julie Albert herself, correct?
I don't have the call detail record in front of me, but okay, yes.
Let's look at tab 6, please. Oh, it may not be in your book.
It's not, sir.
Okay, fair enough. You indicated that you might need to look at a phone record or a phone log to determine whether or not that call was made and what time it was made, correct?
If you have that,
May
please.
I approach you on?
Yes.
Thank you.
There's a highlighted portion, Trooper Proctor. Just focus your attention on that and let me know if that refreshes your recollection.
It does, sir. Thank you.
May I approach?
Yes.
You received after your interview, you received a phone call from Julie Albert about 6:17, about 45 minutes after you began the interview and then left, correct?
Yes.
6:21, you called her back and you spoke for 3 minutes and 58 seconds. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you discuss the interview?
I don't recall the content of that conversation.
And of course, you never memorialized that in any report, did you? The fact that you had a subsequent phone call with Julie Albert on your personal cell phone.
I did not.
Let's turn to tab 5 one more time. And if you could turn to page 2677. Trooper Proctor, after your interview with Julie Albert, your sister, Courtney, texted you, "How did it go at Julie's? She was so nervous." You recall that?
Yes.
In fact, you responded to that with a ha, 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 ha. 4 ha's, right? And then why, question mark, correct?
Correct.
Then you responded, "It was fine, just a quick convo," correct?
Yes.
You were literally reporting back to your sister about the progress of your investigation in a homicide investigation, weren't you?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently.
Were you reporting your progress to your sister about your investigation?
Objection.
Sustained.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Okay.
You are unmuted.
May I?
Yes.
Thank you. Were you reporting your progress of your investigation back to your sister, Courtney Proctor?
No, absolutely not.
But you did say that the conversation, the formal interview went fine. It was just a quick convo, correct?
In response to my sister indicating Julie was nervous, that's why I told her it was fine.
Trooper Proctor, Julie and Chris Albert were not actually treated like witnesses in a murder investigation. They were treated more like friends. Wouldn't you agree?
Objection.
Is that true?
Absolutely not.
We've established that you're very close with your sister, Courtney, correct?
Correct.
You provided your sister with updates on important advancements during the course of your investigation into this case. Did you not periodically?
I made her aware of newsworthy stuff.
That started as early as January 29th, 2022. Isn't that right?
Don't have the exact date or content.
Well, the day of the incident, you began letting her know that you were involved, that you had been assigned, what the status was,
Yes.
the nature of the case, the fact
Correct.
that it was a homicide, correct?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you discussed who the players were, who the people were that were involved. Isn't that right?
I just mentioned Julie and Chris were out earlier in the evening.
So you mentioned the Alberts, correct?
Julie and Chris, yes.
You also mentioned the McCabe's too, didn't you? At some point.
Yes.
Yeah. At 2668, Your Honor, that's the page that I'm referring to. You don't, okay. You don't need to show this at this point. you write homicide, correct?
So I said 2668.
Correct, if I have my page number correct.
You're on the right page, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
You wrote the word homicide, is that right?
Yes,
You were describing to your sister the nature of the case that you are now assigned, is that right?
correct.
She wrote, the Canton thing is a homicide, and you wrote, don't say a word to anyone, correct?
Correct.
And then she wrote, of course not, isn't that right?
Yes.
And then you wrote what?
In the very least, it's suspicious.
In the very least, it's suspicious, correct?
Correct.
So at that time, at least at the time that you wrote that text on the 29th at 3:05 in the afternoon, you believed that the case was suspicious, right?
It was before we found significant pieces of evidence.
So you believed that it was suspicious that it may involve the Alberts, right?
Absolutely not.
She then writes, this is your livelihood, didn't she?
She did.
Meaning this kind of case could make or it could break your career, right?
Objection.
Sustain.
She then wrote, I would never mess with that. Is that right?
Yes.
Your sister, Trooper Proctor, was warning you that you shouldn't be investigating a case in which close friends or family members were involved.
Objection.
Sustain.
Did you take her text? This is your livelihood. I would never mess with that, as a warning from her that you shouldn't be investigating a case that involved close friends.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Absolutely not. That was in response to don't say a word to anyone. And that was how I interpreted this is your livelihood. I would never mess with that.
A couple of minutes later, 3:07 on January 29th, you told your sister, quote, Julie and Chris were at the bar with the victim and girlfriend. Got to interview them. Isn't that right?
Yes.
So you were telling Courtney, your sister, updates on what your investigation advancements were, correct? Who
Just
you're
that
gonna
part.
Interview, why you're going to interview them.
Yes.
She wrote, you got to be kidding me, correct?
Correct.
Did you take that as you got to be kidding me? The Alberts are involved?
No, absolutely not.
And then you wrote, it's not a big deal, correct?
Correct.
And then she wrote, I bet I know the person. Sounds like it is, meaning it is a big deal, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what she meant with those messages there.
But she did write, I bet I know the person, didn't she?
She did write that, yes.
And you know she's very close with the Alberts, correct?
And she's close with Julie and Chris.
You then wrote, no, I meant, or you wrote not. I think you meant no. I meant that they were at the bar with him, correct?
Yes.
She writes, yeah, I got that part. And then she continues on, but I know a lot of their friends, correct?
Yes.
Did you see a problem in this exchange?
Nothing jumped out at me.
Your sister's literally explaining that your family friends are suspects or possible suspects in a murder investigation that you're in charge of. Correct?
Objection.
Sustain.
On January 30th, 2022 at 9:13 in the morning, your sister texted you again, quote, Jesus Christ, the party was at one of the Alberts, correct?
Yes.
And you two were discussing the fact that, to put it in her words, Jesus Christ, these are our friends, right?
Objection.
Sustain.
How did you take her Jesus Christ, the party was at one of the Alberts with 2 exclamation points? How did you take that?
That's the way I'm interpreting my sister's text messages was that surprised and shocked that this is where Mr. O'Keefe was found on the front lawn of that residence.
Could it be Jesus Christ We know these people.
Again, that's how I read that message.
You don't deny, Trooper Proctor, that you were routinely disclosing to your sister pretty intimate details about the investigation, correct?
I wouldn't say intimate. I'd say newsworthy stuff or just generic, nothing
Well,
too specific.
newsworthy, would you have gone to the news at this point in the investigation? Would you have gone to the news and said, Julie and Chris were at the bar, I gotta go interview them?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Is that what you do, Trooper?
No, I would not do that, sir.
So it's not newsworthy. These were details, internal details about the investigation, weren't they?
Yes,
And you were sharing them with your sister, Courtney Proctor, correct?
correct.
And Courtney Proctor's best friend is Jillian Daniels, and one of her closest friends is Julie Albert, right?
Correct.
Then on February 1st, 2022, your sister texts you that she's actually meeting with Julie Albert, didn't she?
Yes,
And that was before you ever interviewed Julie, correct?
yes,
So it appears that Courtney was providing information to Julie of some sort before you were able to actually interview her. Is that right?
Objection.
Sustained.
She was, well, let me ask it this way. You don't deny that Courtney was meeting with Julie before you interviewed her, correct?
correct.
And you don't deny that you had been providing information about the case with Courtney before you interviewed Julie, correct?
Provided information that Julie and Chris were at the waterfall and I needed to interview them. Yes, that's the information I shared.
And who knows what you shared verbally, not in text messages, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you, we have text messages, Trooper Proctor. Did you share other information on phone calls with Courtney?
No,
So the only information we're to believe, you talked to her 5 to 6 times a day. The only information that you claim you shared with Courtney about the details of the investigation are contained in these texts, which we have.
Objection.
I'll let you answer that. Can you answer that?
the information that I share with my sister contained within these texts, yes.
You never discussed this case verbally, over the phone or in person with Courtney.
On the phone, I'm sure there's been conversations that things that have been newsworthy items that have gone to the news. There's definitely been conversations in that regard.
Then before you ever interviewed Julie, your sister informed you that Julie actually wanted to get you a gift for your participation on this case, correct?
Yes.
In tab 5, let's turn to page 2672, Trooper Proctor. With court's permission, may we publish?
Yes.
That page, 2672. You see the text from you, what's up?
Yes.
And what's Courtney Proctor's response?
Nothing. I just saw Julie, and she said, when this is all over, she wants to get you a thank you gift. And I respond with, get Elizabeth one.
Hang on just a second. Let's take them one at a time. You were asked about this on direct examination by Mr. Lally, right?
Correct.
And you looked at the jurors, paused, and said, I never asked for a gift. I never received a gift. Elizabeth never asked for a gift. She never received a gift. You remember that?
Correct.
You said you never asked for a gift, correct?
Correct.
What's your next text?
Get Elizabeth one.
Get Elizabeth one what?
Referring to a gift
Right. So you did, in fact, ask for a gift, didn't you?
for my wife who had been home with my children for the last 10 nights.
From Julie Albert
Yes.
for your participation on this case.
I don't know if that's yes.
Well, Courtney Proctor answers that question by saying, because I guess her and Chris were friends and John, and she's so proud of you for leading this investigation, correct?
Correct.
You're aware during the course of your investigation, well, let me ask it this way. Let me ask a foundational question. Do you pull phone records as a matter of course in investigations of this nature?
Yes.
Did you pull phone records in this case, variously?
The phone records of,
Of anybody? Witnesses, suspects,
not witnesses,
individual people, whatever?
we didn't do We didn't pull full phone records of witnesses.
Victim?
Victim and Miss Reed.
During the course of your investigation, did you become aware that there were 67 calls between Julie Albert and your sister, Courtney, in the months following John O'Keefe's death?
Objection.
I'm going to sustain that objection.
Did you become aware during the course of your investigation of the level of communication between Julie Albert, one of the witnesses on the case, and your sister?
Objection.
I'm sustaining that objection. You can come try and convince me otherwise if you want, Mr. Jackson.
I can ask it a different way, Your Honor. Thank you. Did you ever seek information about phone calls and communications that Julie Albert may or may not have been having with anybody else?
No.
Didn't download her phone, didn't seek her phone records?
No.
Did Courtney ever tell you that she had consistent communications with Julie Albert? Or did you know that otherwise?
Objection.
During the months, let me ask it this way, during the months following John O'Keefe's death, you did continue to have consistent communications with Courtney, though, didn't you?
Yes, I speak to my sister every day.
Trooper Proctor, were you using Courtney, your sister, as an intermediary between you and Julie Albert?
Absolutely not.
You were well aware from the very beginning of your investigation that Colin Albert was, in fact, at 34 Fairview on the night in question, right?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you testified at the grand jury, the state court grand jury on this case, that you knew that Colin Albert was at the location, right?
Yes.
Did you make any concerted efforts to keep Colin Albert's name out of this investigation?
No.
Why is it, Trooper Proctor, that Colin Albert's name fails to appear in a single police report until July 18, 2023?
Colin Albert was not at the home. He left at approximately 12:10 a.m. before anyone from the waterfall had arrived back there.
Let's look at, obviously, part of the job of an investigator is to be as complete and thorough as possible, correct?
Yes.
You don't just take someone's word for something. You look for corroborating evidence, don't you?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you wouldn't take a witness's word for almost anything in a reasonable investigation, would you?
Objection.
Would you?
If-
You can have that.
If I find the witness to be credible and have no reason to lie, then yes, I would take their word.
Would you try to support a witness's statement, or witnesses with an apostrophe, S apostrophe, their statements with corroborating evidence?
Yeah, potentially.
That corroborating evidence might be talking to other witnesses, right?
Yes.
It might be looking at cell phone data, correct?
Correct.
It might be looking at geolocation data, correct?
Yes.
If you're trying to find out where someone is, you might pull information from their phone concerning geolocation data, right?
Yes.
You might pull cell tower information, right?
If there's a need for it.
There's myriad ways that you can find out whether someone's telling the truth about where they were and when they were there, right?
Right.
Let's take a look at your handwritten notes from your interview with Juliana Nagel on October 5th, 2022. This should be tab 7, Trooper Proctor. Oh,
What is it for identification?
my mistake. I thought it was in the tab. It's not. This is a 3-page document. I'll just refresh his recollection with this.
Okay, show Mr. Lally and then go ahead.
Of course. Let me ask a foundational question, Trooper Proctor. Do you remember exactly what's in your notes from a conversation that you had on October 5th, 2022?
I don't know.
Do you think it would refresh your recollection to take a look at your handwritten notes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Take a look at that. And first, let me just ask you if that refreshes your recollection.
It does, sir.
Are those your notes, your handwritten notes from this, at least from partially from this investigation?
Yes.
Does that reflect your handwritten notes based on a conversation that you had with Juliana Nagel on or about October 5th, 2022? May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Does this appear to be an accurate representation or an accurate copy of your notes from your interview with Juliana Nagel?
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I changed my mind. I would like to have this marked as next.
Introduced into evidence?
Correct.
Is there an objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the objection sustained.
Is it true that in your handwritten notes, you list the following individuals based on Juliana Nagel's conversation with you as being at 34 Fairview? Brian, Juliana, Mary Kent, Emily Fabiano, Courtney Alba, Colin Albert, and Sarah Levinson. Correct?
Correct.
You then drafted a report memorializing your conversation with Juliana Nagel, correct?
Yes.
And that report is a formal memorialization of your interview based on your investigation, correct?
Yes, a summary of the conversation for the interview.
And that report is the thing that's turned over to the Commonwealth, correct?
Yes.
And the report is the thing that's entered into discovery and provided to the defense.
Correct.
And isn't it true that in that report, you list the individuals that were at 34 Fairview as Brian, Mary Kent, Emily Fabiano, Sarah Levinson. Is that correct?
Yes.
What's the one name that was left out of your report on that list?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Was there one name left out?
The,
Break that down, Mr. Jackson.
Sure. Isn't it true that in your report, you excluded the one name, Colin Albert, from the list of individuals that were in your notes?
yes, because he arrived later in the evening. The other females were there from the start.
At the time that you wrote your report, the formal report, this one, you did not believe that your handwritten notes were also going to be disclosed, did you?
No, I knew that was a possibility.
When you finally did get around to interviewing Colin Albert, you personally conducted that interview, did you not?
Yes.
Colin
Along with
Albert
Trooper
told you
Zach
that
Clark.
One at a time.
I'm sorry.
Finish your answer, Trooper.
Please go ahead.
Yes, along with Trooper Zach Clark in my office.
Colin Albert told you that he was picked up by Allie McCabe from his uncle's house at 12:10 a.m., correct?
Correct.
Allie McCabe also told you that she picked up Colin Albert at 34 Fairview at 12:10 a.m. and then dropped him off at his house, correct?
Correct.
And then she indicated that she went straight home after that, right?
Yes.
Did you conduct any further investigation to determine whether Colin Albert and Allie McCabe were actually telling the truth about that time?
We did not.
You just took them at their word, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you realize that you had a forensic image at the time. You had a forensic image of Jennifer McCabe's cell phone in your possession, right?
Correct.
You're also aware that she has a Life 360 app on her phone that tracks the location of Allie McCabe, correct?
I was not aware the app tracked her daughter. I knew of the Life 360 app, but I wasn't aware of the capability of her tracking her daughter.
Did you bother to look at Jennifer McCabe's Life 360 app to determine whether Colin Albert and Allie McCabe were telling the truth about the time that they supposedly left 34 Fairview?
Objection.
Did you do that or allow it?
I did not.
Can we take a look at tab 8? Do you recall looking at all at a Life 360 app or its data from Celebrate Report?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you or did you not look at any data from Life 360 from Jennifer McCabe's phone?
Objection.
All right, so this is a good time to take the morning recess, and I'll see Constance.